wanted to make a quick tutorial on getting you and or your students started on using a sea level viewer. This is a very powerful one that was designed by NOAA, and it can do a number of things. But first I want to just give you a little bit of the tools. So this is what you'll get when you first log onto the viewer. So the first thing is probably to put in an area of interest. So let's just put in San Francisco. And a couple tools that you will want to be aware of. Over here, if you click on this first one, this is what kind of base map do you want? And you can have a satellite view, which is what you're seeing right now, or a street view. If you want to look at different features, a street view might be more helpful, but if you want to look at kind of the topography or the overall area, satellite might be better. This is the opacity of the layers that you're looking at, which you will choose later, so you can decide how dark or light you want those layers depending on what you want to see behind them. And then this is really helpful. This is the legend. There are a number of colored overlays, and it's not obvious what they are. This one's a really simple one, but low-lying areas are in this color, areas not mapped, levees. So this is kind of legend for whatever layer you're looking at. One of the things that makes a sea level viewer so powerful is the interactive features, which are over here on the left side. So right now we have sea level rise clicked, and you can toggle up and manually increase sea level using this button right here, and you'll see more and more of the area covered in sea level as you toggle the switch up to higher and higher levels. And you can use either meters or feet, which is this toggle switch down below. And you can see the areas that would be inundated by sea level rise. And then you can also, if you notice these little drop marks, you can toggle to a specific area and it'll show you that area and then what would happen as sea level rose in that specific area. There aren't a lot of those, but there are some of those that are kind of interesting. And then another feature that I really like on this sea level viewer are these local scenarios. So if you click the second icon right here, you will be given 4 different scenarios if you view it by scenario and not by year. An intermediate low, intermediate high, or high. And so for this activity, let's use like an intermediate high sea level increase, and that's kind of like the kind of midpoint projection. And this shows you what sea level would be in 2020, 2040, 2060 at that location. And so you can get a very specific indication of when sea level would reach these different levels at these different locations. All right, one feature that I think is really interesting in this sea level viewer is the marsh mitigation. So if you click on this icon right down there, you'll notice a number of colors show up, and you definitely want to turn on the legend for this. So basically it shows you where the marshes are in this area, where developed areas are, freshwater marshes, brackish, saltwater marshes. It's looking at what happens to these areas as sea level increases. So if you want to zoom in on the kind of southern part of the Bay Area and you raise sea level, you get an idea of what happens to these marshes as sea level rises. So there's quite a striking difference. And if you want to find out a little bit more about that, you can click on this information button right here, which talks about marshes, how you can look at them by scenarios or by year. So the last thing I want to look at is high tide flooding. So if we click on this last icon at the bottom, this is basically looking at parts of the Bay Area that are vulnerable to flooding, not from increases in sea level, but just due to abnormally high tides called king tides. So if you click on it, you'll see huge swaths of the Bay Area are in red, and these areas are vulnerable to exceptionally high tides. So if you zoom out a little bit, you'll notice there are a number of areas where there are tide gauges, and it's kind of interesting. If you click on one of them, you'll get information about that area. Floods at about 1.87 feet above mean higher water. So you can see basically when it has flooded since this tide gauge has been working. And if you want to find a little more information out, you can hit this inundation dashboard, which will give you a lot of tidal information from that area. But when you switch to this view, you're going to have to zoom back in on the tidal gauge you want, which is allometer. So you can either zoom in or you can click it from the list on the left. So as you get closer, that list will be on the left. So click on Alameda or whichever one you want. So by default, you'll be shown the tides for the last 2 days, which isn't really helpful for what we're looking at. So you might want to look at the high tide flood outlook. And that shows how often this has flooded in 2022. And then it shows prediction for flooding due to high tides in the future. And as you can see, that's increased because of sea level rise would be increasing. All right, that's the end of your quick tutorial. Hopefully this will get you started on looking at this amazing sea level viewer.